Okay, we're in Lurgan, County Armagh, and I want to talk about bridges, specifically footbridges. Before I do, what kind of bridge am I talking about and why? Well, there's a lot of ways you could build a footbridge, and there's a lot of money you could spend on it. This is an example here that I quite like, which is the Trinity Bridge in Manchester and Salford. Crosses over the Manchester Ship Canal. It's spectacular from just about any angle. This bridge cost about £1.3 million in 1994, which is worth about 2.7 million in today's money. And it's beautiful from any angle, but this is at the higher end of what you can do with footbridges. One of the big advantages of footbridges, of course, is they don't have to be as strong or robust as road bridges. They don't have to carry cars, they don't have to carry heavy trucks. So they're a bit lighter and hence a bit cheaper to build than road bridges. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to build them, not least of which is they create shortcuts for people on foot and people on bikes. So in the case of the Trinity Bridge here, for example, to drive a car from this point to this point would be quite a bit of a detour. You'd have to detour around several streets to get to it, whereas people on bikes and people on foot can just walk straight across. And the result is, in places like this where there's high amounts of foot traffic, you're going to get more people on bikes and more people on foot moving around. So there's a bit of traffic reduction there, reducing the amount of vehicle miles travelled. They do a lot of that in Holland. They deliberately design the neighbourhoods in such a way that it's quicker to get around on bicycle than it is in the car. They make the cars take the big long detours, but they create shortcuts for people on foot and for people on bikes, and that's one of the reasons why you get so many people riding bikes in Holland. So bridges offer an opportunity to do the same sort of thing. As I said, that's at the higher end of what you can do with a bridge. There are cheaper options too, like this option here, which is for a project in Wales. This is a proposal to replace a railway bridge with a footbridge over a railway with a design like this. This costs, depending on how you do it, I think the cost of this came out at something like £250,000 up to £750,000, depending on how many bells and whistles you add to it. Scheme total, almost $1 million there, 0.9 million for the really fancy proposal, $250,000 for the bare minimum. So, that's one of the decisions that local government has to take when taking on projects like this. Do you want to do a really fancy, one big fancy project, or do you want to do multiple projects a little bit cheaper, which is going to be more useful to you? It's not an easy question to answer, but I can think of a few candidates around the Lurgan area, 3 or 4 candidates actually, places where I think a footbridge would be quite useful, starting with the Loch Road. Here's the Loch Road where it meets the motorway, and as you drive out of Lurgan, you'll notice the road bends off to the right, but it didn't always bend off to the right. And if we look at the old Ordnance Survey map, let me zoom, pull up the modern map actually. Handy little tool. This shows the historic map. Forgive me if the computer runs a little bit slowly, and excuse the sound of my cat moving her water bowl around in the background. So there's the old map before the motorway was built. This is 1842. Hard to imagine the place without the motorway now, but this is how it used to look. So the Loch Road, currently it bends off to the right, where McConaughey's house is there on the left, and then there's a bit of a dead end road, Loch Road Lower. So that was not always a dead end. And then you go other side of the roundabout, you get that crossroads there at Analoist, and there's another little road that goes into a dead end up against the motorway. So that used to be a road that went all the way through. That was the Loch Road. It went straight to the loch, straight to the townland of Analoist. So the construction of the motorway and the new city and everything all changed everything around here, and it cut these communities off from each other really. Now the motorway is a very useful tool, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting we close the motorway or anything, but there are disadvantages to it because, imagine riding a bike down here, which I used to do. And I'm a fairly seasoned rider. I'm one of the more fearless ones. But even I don't enjoy riding on a road like this. This is designed for high vehicle speeds. You've got these enormous chevrons here that serve very little purpose. These right turn pockets, which I don't know if are always necessary. Heavy lorries going past you at high speeds, eager to get onto the motorway. Heavy lorries coming off the motorway, still with the motorway driving mentality. You've still got the high speeds. And they're coming around here, looking to the right, checking to see if it's safe to merge onto the roundabout. They're not looking to the left to see if there's any bicycles. So this is not a great cycling experience. I mean, you could, in theory, paint a cycle symbol on this footpath and turn it into a shared use path and put a giveaway sign at every side road, but it's still going to be a pretty bad cycling experience, and I'd be very surprised if anybody used it. In Northern Ireland, that's a typical approach to providing so-called bicycle infrastructure. You paint a bicycle symbol on a footpath and you make them give way at every crossroads, every side road. You basically relegate the cyclist to the status of a pedestrian, and then nobody uses it, and then people say, well, you spend all this money on bicycle lanes and nobody uses them. Well, it's because they're poorly designed. But good bicycle infrastructure would involve things like dedicated bicycle routes to places like this. So imagine if you could ride down this, what is now a dead end, Loch Road Lower, and then keep on going continuously, and then up over a footbridge or bicycle pedestrian bridge over the motorway. That would give you a pretty clean route down to all this fantastic facility you've got here, Oxford Island and Kinnigo Marina. You got all these wonderful facilities, but there's no safe way to get there on a bicycle from the town, really. You got to contend with this abomination of a junction here. So a dedicated bike route far from all the traffic, I think, would be heavily used. And how much would it cost? I mean, you'd be looking at least £1 million, £1 or £2 million. Even if you used a simple design like that one in Wales that I showed you, this one here, the truss design, that would be, that would actually have to be a decent length as well. You're looking at some considerable engineering challenges here, because you're not just crossing over the motorway, you're also crossing over the slip roads, and the slip roads are, they start to rise up. They're starting to rise up off the level of the motorway. It's actually quite high here, so any footbridge that you build would need to be far enough above here that even tall lorries could get underneath it. So yeah, not going to be cheap, but definitely worth thinking about. Anyway, it's fun to think about this sort of thing. What if you did get a nice bicycle pedestrian bridge in here? You would have to do something, I think, with this other junction as well here at Kiln Road and Ansborough Road. You'd need to sort something out for bikes here, because this is not a good cycling experience getting through here. You'd need some sort of dedicated bicycle infrastructure on one side of the road or another. But once you get past this junction, there's ample room on the left for a dedicated bicycle track, where the old road used to be, actually. You could cut through the wild here and build a dedicated two-way cycle track. And then as for the Loch Road itself, where all these lorries are going up to Silverwood and Ansborough industrial estates, I'd say there's a bit of room here at the side of the road for a segregated bicycle lane that keeps the cars out. Plenty of room. These chevrons, they serve no purpose, only to make traffic go faster. It gives people a sense of security. It encourages higher vehicle speeds, which is the opposite of what we should be doing in a built-up urban area. We should be slowing traffic down on roads like this, not trying to speed it up. And these traffic islands, don't get me started on them. These are bicycle death traps. Creates a pinch point. They're terrifying to cycle through them. You're constantly looking over your shoulder to see if someone's going to try to go for it and accelerate and squeeze in and jam you up against the curb. So room for improvement there in the design of this road, but that all has to be part of the same project. It's no point in just building a bridge here across the motorway. You've got to look at the entire route between Oxford Island and the town. Got to be easier ways to get around by bicycle. So a lot to think about there with the Loch Road. So that's the first one I wanted to talk about. The second one I want to talk about, and I've covered this in another video, is Kilvergan Road, Kilvergan Lane, Common. So there's the primary school, St Patrick's Primary School, my old alma mater, as they say. Tannetmore Gardens is here. You got the lakes, you got the South Lake Leisure Centre, all these wonderful facilities, and then you have a housing area here, and you have another housing area here, Derry McCash. This is Wolf's Island Terrace, Coleman Park and so on. A lot of kids living here, a lot of people who I think would like to be able to access the school and Tannamore Gardens and the lakes by bicycle. And you could do it because, if we look at the old Ordnance Survey map, the historic map, if you look at the modern map, we all know, if you go down Kilvergan Road, this dead ends up against the motorway. Let's just take a look at that. So there's your dead end up against the motorway, but it wasn't always a dead end. It used to go all the way through. It used to go all the way through up to Ballinary North Road, all the way up to Wolf's Island, where Wolf's Island Terrace is now. So if we so there it is, still visible on the satellite view. It's an unmaintained road. I think it's just used by farmers for accessing their fields. But if we take a look at that, can we? Come on, Google, don't make me angry. Give me the street view, there it is. Yeah, you can still see the entrance to it. I'm pretty sure it's still a public right-of-way, it's just not maintained because there's nothing down there. So, but it's still got road signs on it. It looks to me like it's still a public right-of-way. So, this could be repaved. You could pour some tarmac on this and build a bicycle-only route that would connect all these housing developments to the school, to Tannamore Gardens, to the lakes. And again, part of the route here would need a bit of work here at Kilvergan Road. That bit of Kilvergan Lane. It's a low traffic route because it's a dead end for cars, but bikes coming out here, you've got a little bit of a dicey bit of road here. A lot of heavy lorries going up and down this road to get to Carn Industrial Estate. So if you could sort something out for bikes here, again with another protected bicycle track, that would give you access to Tannamore Gardens and the lakes and the entire bicycle network of Craigavon, basically. So that's the second area I wanted to look at. And then the third candidate, and there's been a lot of talk about this one over the years for as long as I can remember, and that is the Bann Foot. This is a bit more of a controversial one, this one, for reasons that we'll get into in a minute, but let's look at the historic map. Because there's a few things I want to show you here about the Bann Foot. So you may know there used to be a ferry here at the Bann Foot. A fellow called Mr. Wilson used to pull the ferry across on a rope. You would drive your car onto this barge and he would pull you across, or your horse, back in the day. So I have no memories of this myself, but my brothers are old enough to remember it. Apparently it was quite terrifying to drive onto this thing. Interestingly, he had to rebuild the jetties when they lowered the loch, because when the loch was lowered, the Bann also was lowered. So he had to lower the platforms to allow cars to drive on. But yeah, he pulled you across on a rope, and that's how people got across in those days. So there was a campaign there to build a bridge at the Bann Foot, but it's not a universally popular campaign, as we'll get to in a minute. So let's go back to the Ordnance Survey map anyway. So there's the modern map. I'm going to look at the historic map from 1842. And it says here, Bann Foot Ferry. So there's been a ferry operating here for quite some time. There was a ferry operating for quite some time, but let's just go upstream. Let's go back up the Bann a bit, because there's one other thing I want to show you. Okay, you see that? Bush's Ferry. Bush's Ferry. So there was another ferry here across the Bann. So where is that? Let's take a look on the modern map. It was about something like... It was west of W.D. Irwin's, where they had their sand washing place. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so it was on this side. It's marked on this side of the river. So there's where the ferry was. There's a road here, Derry Carn Road. I'm not very familiar with these roads because very seldom did I ever get onto that side of the river. But what you're looking at here Is that it? There was an entrance there somewhere. Okay, so where that gate is, it's a gate leading into a pile of bushes. That used to be a road, or a bit of a lane at least. And this row of trees is all overgrown on top of the lane. So that's an old road that led up to where the ferry was. And where is that in the grand scheme of things now? Well, the row of trees is still visible. I don't see much evidence here of a road that ever led down to the old ferry on the other side. But this is around the back of, this is around by Ballinacor here. This is around, or Ballinary, or Ballina, I think it's Ballinacor. This is around the back of where John Burns used to live here, near the wee loch. So let's keep going. Sorry, I need to plug my computer in here. Excuse me for a second while I plug in. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let's keep on moving. So there's Bush's Ferry. Let's go back upstream a little bit more. And there's another ferry. Look at that. Rob's Ferry, that says. So where is that? This is much easier to spot on the modern map. You all know where this is. This is, there's the Palms. There's Ballinary North Road. There's the Charlestown Road. So you come out of the Palms and turn left. Come out of the Palms and turn left and you find yourself going up here. And I always remember this old hut on the right. It says there, Bann Anglers on the sign. Looks a bit faded now, it's seen better days. Bann Anglers. But there's a road that goes in here, which the Google Street View car didn't go in there, but I believe it is a public right-of-way. I've been down there myself. But that goes pretty close to the Bann, it goes down to the river. And that's where the ferry would have taken you out on this side. And then as for the other side, the ferry was accessible from here. So there you go. There's the lane that led to the ferry. That would have got you across the river. So don't know if that lasted into the age of motor vehicles, but certainly horses, carts, people on foot definitely would have been able to cross the river there. So that's the old ferry. And when you look at the map too, it's quite interesting. You're welcome to play with this tool to your heart's content. Look at the old road. It bends. It doesn't go in a straight line the way it does nowadays. And the reason is because there's a hill here, or at least there was a hill. And if you're driving through here now, you're going through, you get these slopes on either side of the road. I always remember a fella who lived here. Can't remember which, I think it might have been on this side. He had a hover mower. I remember him cutting the grass, standing up here and swinging the hover mower from side to side like a pendulum. But these are not natural features, these slopes. This is a cutting. So there was a hill here and they cut through the hill to straighten out the road. So the old road goes in a detour. The current road goes straight through. A lot of changes to the road. And I went down a rabbit hole earlier of looking at the old road and comparing it to the new one. Looking at all the little changes in it. So there's a lot of little features there you're welcome to explore. Look at that. There's another straightening of the road. And there's the old road. And it's still visible on the landscape as well. You can still see it from the street view. There it is. Or from the satellite view. So there you go. So those are your three options. Those are the three ferries then that used to cross the Bann. So Slantry is a name for this old townland here. So there was a ferry at Slantry, there was or Ballinary, and there was one about here at Derrytas South, I think was the name of the townland, and of course one at the Bann Foot. So the one at the Bann Foot was the more recently operational one. So, if you're going to build bridges, there's a series of options for you. I'd say that one at Slantry actually is a pretty attractive option. What if you built a bridge here, Would there be as many objections as there are at the Bann Foot? So the arguments for and against building a bridge at the Bann Foot, I mean, people arguing for it would argue that if you build a bicycle pedestrian bridge, it allows access to Mahari and there's a lot of good stuff that you can access on the other side here that we're pretty much cut off from. This whole area is basically, it's like living on a big peninsula, the fact that it's all now one big dead end. And it really does cut communities off from each other. There's no way to cross the Bann until you get to the motorway, really. This is all a big dead end here. And it wasn't always like that, those old ferries that used to operate centuries ago meant that this was the main route, really, for anyone heading west towards Dungannon. That's why you've got these roads, the B roads now, but this used to be a main route from Lurgan to Dungannon and Coal Island, from Portadown to Dungannon and Coal Island. You would have gone this way, across the Bann at the Bann Foot, or one of those ferries. There are nowadays, there's no commercial reason. You're not shipping goods across that route, but that's what the motorway is for. But for leisure use, for bicycles and for cycling, definitely this would be perfect. Opens up a lot of possibilities. And if you increase the amount of cycling, it's not like increasing the number of cars. Cars and trucks, that's a problem. Pollution, noise, traffic, the danger that comes with cars and so on. Bicycles don't present any of those problems. But there are local people who are concerned that it would lead to antisocial behaviour, that it would lead to that a bridge would be an eyesore because it would be a man-made structure. I've heard all these arguments before. Personally, I think whether or not it's an eyesore depends very much on how the bridge is designed. I mean, Trinity Bridge in Manchester, is that an eyesore? I don't think so. Bridges like that can add value to your property. People are willing to pay a premium for a view of a bridge if the bridge is attractive enough. But anyway, there are arguments for and against building a bridge. Personally, I think it would be a good thing. But there are plenty of other options as well for building bridges. The Bann Foot, maybe farther upstream, up the Bann. Certainly crossing the motorway. The motorway cuts people off from each other too. So you could create bicycle shortcuts here in numerous ways by crossing, whether bridging the Bann or bridging the M1. So there's a lot to think about there. And if you're interested in getting involved in it, there is an organisation there, Sustrans, which I'll give you a link in the description to Sustrans. You can contact them, join Sustrans, and get active if you really want to see this sort of thing. You really have to ask for it, you have to demand it, you have to campaign for it. You can't just take the cynical view, oh, it'll never happen, they will never spend money on this sort of thing. It'll never happen if people just take the attitude that it'll never happen, and if people give up on it. But if you want this sort of thing to happen, you have to work for it, you have to campaign for it, you have to hassle your political representatives. And non-profit organisations like Sustrans are a very effective vehicle for getting that sort of work done. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in this sort of thing and bicycle infrastructure in general, get out there and ask for it.